the new ones, I don't even wear. Because they become so comfortable. Because they are so comfortable.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
My name is Mendy Levitin, and Rabbi Farkash's brother-in-law. He asked me to step in this week for the class. Just wanted to start on a few ideas. Slowly move through the Parsha. So outside first, we have the story. The Parsha starts this week called Chayei, the life of Sarah. The obvious question that the Rabbi asked many times is, it's the entire beginning of the Parsha discusses the death of Sarah, not the life of Sarah. But at the end of someone's days, we could actually look back and tell how they lived. And just a small idea on that. The Rebbe says that is we find that we say that the reason we mention all Sarah's days are to say that she lived a complete life. I mean, she maximized the highest level in her life. But what we find is that unlike, let's say, her son Yitzchak, which we're going to discuss this idea soon, that Yitzchak was born into greatness. I mean, he was into holiness. He was conceived in a holy manner. He had circumcision at 8 days old. He was advised not to leave Eretz Yisrael, not to leave the Eretz Canaan, even in a time of famine, even when his father did go down to Egypt. Even on we know that halachically, even today halachically, if someone would want to leave Eretz Yisrael, to leave Israel, it's not so simple. It's the land of the Jewish people, so how could you leave Israel? So there's a few conditions. One condition is to learn Torah. Another condition is if you need it for parnasa, for livelihood. Another reason is if you need to get married. If a person needs to get married, you have to go out of Eretz Yisrael. If a person finds that it's challenging or difficult, or there's an opportunity for them to meet a nice girl or a girl to meet a nice boy in someplace else outside of Israel, then you're allowed to go out and meet a nice lady. Avram obviously did not want his son, to marry anyone from the locals. He made that very clear to his servant Eliezer. He told him, I do not want her to marry. He didn't want him to marry Eliezer's family either, even though he was not just a servant, but he was Eliezer was a spiritual servant. He taught and he fed. It's a damesek that he gave to drink spiritually in the teachings of his master. So he wasn't just any servant. He was on a high level. But nevertheless, Avram would not marry into his family, and Avram wanted to marry specifically to his family, his own family. And he sent Eliezer to faraway land to go find a wife. But why didn't Yitzchak go himself? We find that although we know Yaakov left home because he was he had issues with his brother, he had a fight with his brother, he had a disagreement, the blessings, you'll learn about it next week. But the official reason that why his mother told him to leave was to find a shidduch, to find a nice girl. And we don't find that why didn't Yitzchak go himself? Because Yitzchak was holy. And Hashem said to him, you're like once you've been put on the altar, you're like a sacrifice. A sacrifice can't just go anywhere. So Yitzchak lived an entire life of holiness. He was so holy that he couldn't see anything negative. He went blind. There's a story told that there's a great tzaddik that walked into a room on Shabbos and started to I think the tzaddik was Reb Nachum Chernobyl, in the times of the Alter Rebbe. He walked into a room on Shabbos, a nice lit room. Everyone was sitting there, and he's walking in like he can't see anything. He's tapping the walls. He's trying to figure out how to walk. And everyone's looking. What's wrong with you? What can't you? It's dark. I can't see anything. Everyone's looking. What do you mean it's dark? It's beautiful. It's nice. The lights are on. So it turned out they found out that the lights were put on Shabbos in a non-permissible way. It turned out whatever the circumstances was, And he was on that kind of spiritual level that the lights were not supposed to be there. He didn't see. Yitzchak couldn't handle to see his daughter-in-law's behavior. It says that they sacrificed to the idols, Esav's wives. He went blind. He was very holy. Sarah was like Avram. She went on a journey in life. She married Avram before he became Avram Avinu, before he was even Avram, that was out there working and spreading the word of God. She found God with Avram, or at some stage. We know they married at a younger age, and the process of becoming who they became as individuals, as a couple, Avram and Sarah. You know, the name. We see it in her name. Sarai, her initial name, was Sarai, meaning my Sarah, which was Avram calling her. They had their own personal time together. It was before she went out and became Sarah. The Sarah from the word of the Sarah is like a from the word Sar, that she was a high aristocratic lady who was involved in bringing people closer to the idea of a single God. So she herself progressed in her life like Avram did, and they did together as a couple. So, but nevertheless, we find that we say that she had a complete life, and therefore it's an amazing lesson actually, because she at the end of her 8 days, she was on such a high, much more spiritual level than she was towards the beginning of her journey. But we don't say that she finished her life as a complete person, that every day she had was a complete day. Even though the days that she started off were not on the same level as days that she finished. I mean, we find an amazing thing. How did Sarah pass away? So then we have the story that we told, right? That she was told by Og, who had some, who was constantly mixing in and out of the Jewish story for hundreds of years, came to tell her that, just, by the way, did you hear the latest? Your husband just, that outing they went on, he actually took your single son and was about to sacrifice him on the altar. And the news of yes, the news of no. And the conclusion was that it says that her soul couldn't take it and left. So the idea is interesting, that if you read this story plainly, it seems like this was a negative consequence of the story of the Akedah, right? Here we have Yitzchak. This is the moment. This is the moment the Jewish people talk about. That we talk about this at every Rosh Hashanah. When we come to make our case to God in the new year, one of the things that we talk about is the Akedah, the sacrifice or the attempted sacrifice of Yitzchak, right? Every single morning. Before the prayer, we say the Akedah. This is a fundamental part of the Jewish story. Avraham Avinu was the first proper story of self-sacrifice, of Mesiras Nefesh, and that gave his children the ability to do it. We have now Hanukkah coming up, and Chana and her sons that all were killed by Antiochus. She says, who did she scream out to? She screams out to Avram. Yeah, you sacrificed one, or you attempted to sacrifice one. I actually sacrificed all my children. So how could we say that out of such a story, Sarah dies? The consequence, the negative part of the story is that Sarah dies. Sarah gets misinformed, and it happens. She gets too strong. Please, thank you. She gets too strong. Points of information. One is that your husband's about to sacrifice him. The next one that he didn't sacrifice him, and she's too overwhelmed and she dies. She was an elderly lady and she was too overwhelmed and died. But that comes out. It turns out that it's a negative story, right? That happens. So we learn that's not like that. Actually, it wasn't that she died because she couldn't handle information. She actually reached a level higher than Avram did, higher than her son Yitzchak did. Yitzchak did not end up being as a sacrifice. She became so spiritually uplifted and emotional of what Yitzchak was able to have accomplished by being sacrificed, that actually on a spiritual high, her soul left her body. that it reached such a high level that she became like the level, like another Venaviu, the highest level of what's called in Hebrew Kloisa Nefesh. She actually, her soul yearned to connect back to its creator. Just the information that there's such an idea of the sacrifice of her son actually brought out in her such a level of completion that she actually, her soul left her body in such a level of absolute holy spiritual perfection. That she actually perfected who she was. So here Sarah has this whole long journey that she goes through. She starts off Sarai, she becomes Sarah, she has Yitzchak, and she dies at the highest point of her life. And the lesson is obvious. The lesson is really that we don't have to always be perfect. Our life is not about that we could have to look back and say, I was perfect from day one till today. Or till the day if you're lying and if a person's lying there or thinking they're lying there on their deathbed, God forbid, and they think back and say, well, I wasn't perfect my whole life. You don't have to be perfect your whole life. Sarah wasn't perfect her whole life. But we nevertheless say that she had absolutely complete days because as to the limits that she had, she was able to maximize, and she had an awareness to maximize her days that she was on the level that she was. I mean, even if today I'm not a perfect, but what's the best person? Who's the best person I could be today? Even in the limitations, even in the circumstances, even though I know I have so much more to learn, I have so much more to grow. But and I can't do it all in one day. No one could grow, so no one could leap constantly every single day. But can I at least maximize today? Is today going to be a full day? Because we live in a physical world, in a real world. A real world, we have real challenges. We have real ups and real downs. Some days are going to be better than others. But how do we deal with each day? Each individual day, what Sarah was faced with, she maximized. She was the best Sarah she could be for that day. And that's why it's not, again, the lesson from Sarah wasn't that she was that she was righteous her entire life. It's not that we're here to judge Sarah. We're here to take inspiration from Sarah and to learn from her. How one maximizes every single day. So that's the basic idea in the story of the idea of Chayei Sarah and why is it the life of Sarah, because we learn about her life. At the end, we could look back and say in the completion. I want to stop in a verse. So what happens is, so Avram goes. This is one of the classic stories, right? So Avram goes to bury his wife Sarah, and he knows that he has to bury her in a certain place, right? So he knows that he has to bury her in Maras Machpelah. That's clear to him. We know tradition has it that it's called Machpelah. The name itself represents that couples belong there. It's a double Machpelah from the word kofel, doubles of couples. And so whether it was a kind of cave in a cave, they're trying to figure out. But the main idea is that all the couples were buried there. The who's who of the world: Adam and Chava, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah are buried there in Esav's head. So we have he knew that he had to be there, and he was already Avram. We know one thing we find interesting about Avram is that not that the Torah is mincing in words, especially in the story of here. We never find that we have to give Avram titles, right? When Eliezer comes to say, I'm Avram's servant. Avram who? Everyone knew Avram was, right? So Avram didn't need a title. When Avram went and conquered Stone, Shem came down. Everyone knew. He was evidently very well known. He had an effect on the entire world. He introduced the new idea to the world. He's influencing his whole area, and obviously that was the main part of society at the time. So Avram comes to bury his wife, and what happens? They say, of course, there's no question. You're Avram. You are. There's not even a challenge. So he says, you're right. I can bury, like the Pastor Rashi says, I could either exercise my right as the one who God said this will be my land. And again, you have to think about it. Avram saying he doesn't say anywhere that he came with an army or he came with a kind of a way of enforcing his claim, right? It just says, if I wanted to, I can, just by saying it. Means he had that kind of influence that if he would just say, I demand that you let me bury my wife here because God told me that this is going to be my land, although you've been living here, right? So people would have accepted that. But he says, no, I'm going to take it as a toshav. I'm going to take it as someone as now I'm just a resident here, and I'd like to pay like anyone else would have to pay for the burial of the wife, and I'm ready to pay full price. So what happens? So the Ephron, who then that day gets because it was in his land, he gets So we want Avram to be able to be to only deal with the highest level of society, being people that would be respectful for Sarah and for Avram. So he becomes the leader of that area of that day specifically, and he says, "You know what? You're right. It's if you want to pay full price," and he charges this crazy amount of money of 400 gold silver coins, and Avram gives him a international currency that could be used anywhere and be recognized and respected. And there was a few years ago there was a craze about gold. People were buying gold. At least when I was in Israel. So I was reading up somewhere where someone said you can't just buy gold anywhere. You have to buy it by certain bulletin places that are recognized. People that mint the bars or the coins, so you should be able to just give a document and say, I bought the coin here, I bought the bar here, and it'll be right away recognized and you get full price. So to Avram told Ephraim, I'm not just going to give you a currency that you could use in the area, I'm going to give you a currency you can use every you want. So what happens? So obviously he says, okay, I want 400 coins, that's the price. So what happens? It says that in chapter 23, verse 16, it says, Vayishma Avram El Ephron, he heard what he said, that I'd like to charge 400 silver coins. Vayishkal Avram Ephron as a kesef, and he waited out, means he came to pay up. Asher Dibur Ba'ozni B'nei Ches, Arba Beis Shekel Kesef Oiver L'Sefer, he gave 400 coins, silver coins, that were over the secher, that could be used in an open market in any currency in any place. So we find, I'm sure you've maybe heard about this, but it's just such an interesting idea, that in the word Ephron, when it says that Avram paid Ephron, it's missing a letter of his name. Ephron is spelled Ayin Pei Reish Vav Nun Sofit, long nun, and the one time it says that he actually paid him, it says Ayin Pei Reish Nun, it is missing the letter Vav. Yeah. So it's not just Torah didn't miss out by mistake. There's a reason. What's the reason? This is a sign the Torah was showing that the Torah found Ephron to be greedy. Because it says, the Yaakov brings down, it says that Chaser Vav, it's missing the letter Vav. So he brings down from the Balaturim, the great Balaturim, Rabbi Yaakov Balaturim, which was also, he wrote the Arberturim, which was the pre on the Shulchan Aruch. The fish Haya Ayin Ra Ayin, the Ephron Chaser Vav Oila Lemisbar Ra Ayin. If you take the letter Vav out of the name of Ephron, and you leave the Ayin Pei Reish Nun, which makes out to be 70, 80, 250, that comes out to the same gematria as the word Ra'ayin, a bad eye. Torah didn't like that he was greedy. It means when Avram came to him, he said he's ready to pay for it, he could have given him proper value, and instead he gave him an exorbitant amount of money that he asked for. And therefore they took out the letter Vav to show that he actually, the Torah testified, gives testimony that he actually he acted greedy. And it says, also based on the Kli Yakar brings down, based on what it says in the Gemara Bava Basra, that whoever gives a noisim pruta la'ani, if someone gives tzedakah, charity, to a coin, pruta as a coin, to an ani, to a poor man, misbarach v'sheish brachas, he gets blessed with 6 blessings. And since he had an evil eye, he wasn't just like someone who. What is a person who gives charity? Someone who gives charity to a poor person he has a good eye. But someone who doesn't, someone who has an ayin ra, someone who doesn't have a good eye, he doesn't get blessed with 6 blessings. And again, the Torah tells us that by taking out the letter 6, which is vav, is the number 6 out of his name, that he didn't get any blessing. It's There was an interesting story. The Lubavitch Rebbe in the early years went to go pay a shiva visit to a rabbi. And the Rebbe inquired from this rabbi if he was publishing his father's work. This rabbi was publishing his own father's work. And he said, my father really didn't want me to publish his work, and the Rebbe was saying that he should publish it. Even if your father doesn't want, you should publish it because the Torah shouldn't be forgotten and it should be published. And he asked him if he publishes his own work. And so he said, yeah, he has some books. So the Rebbe said, I will take back, if you want, I will take back some of your books and put it into my library and learn it. He goes, if you give it to me, then I'll for sure learn it. And so his attendant was in this conversation. And the attendant said, it's with the Gemara from the story of Ephron and from the story of Avram and Ephron, the story of Marsa Machpelah, the Talmud actually learns the halachic rules of how one could purchase something through money. That we learn from Ephron, just like Avram purchased the land with money. That's what we learned that one because Torah doesn't just take it for granted. Torah has an idea called a kinyan, to acquire something. How do you acquire something, right? So we have a kedushin when people get married, when they acquire. So we do it with there's certain ways to acquire things. One of the ways to acquire things, we learned that you could acquire it through money, and therefore we apply that actually in a marriage, right? So when the husband gives the ring to his wife, that's a level of acquisition. That's a kinyan, it's called, and we learn it from the story of Ephron. So he says this attendant wanted to say in a sharp manner that lekicha, to take something you have to pay. It means the Rebbe said he wants a book. He says if you want a book, pay for it. So the Rebbe looked at him and the Rebbe said that from the same place we learn about paying, we also learned that he lost the letter of his name. And the first attendant backed off and he didn't pursue, and later he apologized. So another thing we find interesting about the 400, the Kli Yakar brings down another very interesting point. He says that this idea that the negativity of the 400, we find 4 places in Jewish history. Okay, where else do we find the number 400? So the first place we find 400 is Ephron. He took 400 coins.
So it's slavery, right?
Who?
400 years in slavery.
Okay. So what's that? How's that connected to a bad eye? Because Joseph's brothers were jealous of him. They sold him to Egypt, to Pharaoh. Eventually made his way down there. And because of that, the Jews ended up in exile 400 years. Again, it started off with an evil eye. Esau was envious or unhappy, or however you want to put it, with the fact that Yaakov, Jacob's brother, got the blessings. And how many people did he come to meet him with? 400 men. We find later at the end in the story of King David, right? This is the week of King David also. We learn about King David at the Haftarah. What was the story of King David? That King David went, when he was still a militia in the times of King Saul, so he also would protect certain people under his watch. And one of those people who took protection from him was Naval HaKarmeli. And then he asked him to feed his people that were his soldiers or his group that were hungry, and he didn't want to. So again, he had ayin ra. He had an evil eye. He didn't want to feed David. And David came again with 400 men to exercise punishment on Naval HaKarmeli. So we see the idea of 400 is connected. That 400 is connected. It wasn't a positive thing. So the Torah doesn't. Although again, this is something that happens. That Avram could have avoided all this. A, they offered it to him for free. B, he himself said I could have taken it for free. And D, the way he did purchase it was in a way that Torah didn't actually approve of Ephron's behavior. But nevertheless, we find that's how important it was that Avram had to buy it. Because there's many discussions of why he did it. It means at that point, did he say, the idea was that at that point he didn't get the land yet. It means God promised it to him. But the question, if that was the case, then he had no claim to Ephron. But the idea is basically that the way we learn it, the way we view it on a more of a kind of avoda, spiritual lesson we can take from it, is that in life, how much value is there to life in things that we earn. It means even though we could sometimes a person can take an approach in life and say, what's it about? Is it about getting it done, doing it, or is it about the effort in getting it done? So you can say, well, as long as I get it, then what's the difference? What kind of effort I exercise? Avram teaches us here that there is an idea of effort. because he could have taken it for free, but he wanted to invest. I also want to discuss a bit about the story of Eliezer. Okay, so Eliezer is an interesting character. He's another. A funny thing we find in history, just as footnote we find in history, is that certain people that were by fathers, we don't see them showing up by sons or daughters, right? So you have, what happened to Eliezer after Avram passed away? We don't know what happened to him. Did he continue on his job? Did he disappear? And we find that in many places in history. We find the prophets that were prophesying at certain kings, with certain kings, and you don't know what happened to them. You have some prophets that were over, like Isaiah or Yirmiyahu, they prophesied over a period of time with certain kings. But some people, they show up into history and they disappear. Again, because Torah is not really a history book. Torah is a book of lessons, and the lessons that we learn from Eliezer are the lessons of how he was in relationship to Avram. The Torah is not here to tell us afterwards what happened to Eliezer, because it's not a book of history. It's about the history. It's about the lessons we learn from Eliezer, and that is in the relationship with Avram. There was a great rabbi in Australia. His name is Rabbi Groner. He's the Rebbe's secretary's brother, and he was sent on the Rebbe's shlichus to Australia, and mainly in Melbourne, but in Australia in general. And he would go. The Rebbe didn't view positively at any point, especially in the Sphira times, in the time of counting the Omer. But in general, the Rebbe didn't like that we would fly over the date line. The Rebbe would always long that he would fly the other way around, so through Asia, through Israel. And when he would go to Australia, he would always have a certain kind of mission from the Rebbe, something or the other to do in Israel when he would stop over. So here he's a young man. He was sent as a young man. And he's a young man, he comes to Jerusalem, and he had some sort of mission to speak at a certain gathering, where it was maybe looked at, Yerushalayim is not like Jerusalem of old, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, however long ago it was, and it's not, at any point Jerusalem was not like Seattle, but especially those days, for a young person to come and address a bunch of older rabbis seemed maybe a little out of place. So he got up there to speak, and he said, listen. This is how he started off his speech. He said, listen, it doesn't really, who am I to come address the great rabbis of Jerusalem? I'm just a young man. But, Eved Avram Anochi, I'm the servant of Avram. So, like Eliezer came and he said to the family of Avram, I'm the servant of Avram. This young rabbi said, I'm the servant of Avram. I come as a representative of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And therefore, because I come as a representative of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, therefore I will speak in front of you and say what I want to say. So Eliezer comes to he's on this mission, and it's an important mission. We find it so important that the Torah testifies that he actually had a famous thing called Kvitzas Haderech. He didn't have to. He didn't have to go through the exercise of actually getting there. He left. He says the same day I left, the same day I arrived. Although it was approximately about I think close to over 1,000 kilometers distance. So it was quite a distance that he did in a single day, and not just him, with him and his whole entourage of camels and gifts and everything. And I'm sure he came with a few people. So he comes to the well, and that's the place where everyone. Moses learned that's where you find the shidduch is at the well. So he goes to the well, and he does a very interesting prayer. We find a lot of interesting things about his prayer. Number one thing he does is he conditions God, and he in a way tests God to see. He wants to be. He knows this is an important mission, and he wants to be successful in it, and he wants something that we all want many times in our life. We don't always get certainty. He wanted certainty, right? How many times in our life do we have absolute certainty in the decision that we have to make? Very few times, right? We try to do the best to know if it's the right thing, but certainty is another level. But he wanted certainty. He wanted to know for certain that this is going to be the girl for his master's son. And he gives a condition to achieve that certainty. He says that if she comes and she's going to show signs that are worthy of a wife of Yitzchak. And she comes and she shows he says, and doesn't even finish his prayer, and out comes Rivka. And he's so sure, he's so certain, he's achieved such level of certainty, he doesn't even ask her who she is. He gives her gifts immediately. Means what Avram didn't say, this was his own condition. Avram never said, go down to the well and find a girl who's going to give you water. Avram said, go to my family and find me a daughter from my family. He decided, before he even went to the family, he went to the well, which wasn't he. We don't find that he was instructed to do that. If he would have, let's say, gone straight with instructions, he should have gone straight to the house of Besuel. Before he went to the well, he gone straight there and said, listen, I'm here on a mission. And we know that his time was very precious, right? He got this crazy miracle of Kvitzas Aderech, of jumping the land. I mean, he didn't have to, he left and came the same day. He should have taken that as a sign, go immediately to Besuel's house. But instead he stops at the water and he wants certainty first. He doubts his mission initially. We find that he discusses his doubts with Avram, saying, what happens if she doesn't want to go? So he's not sure that he's going to get the right girl. Being a good servant, Mishrabi knows the family that he's being asked to go see, Besuel. And Lavan, her brother, I mean, it wasn't the best of yichus, it wasn't the best of relations. And he has his doubts and he wants certainty, and he gets the certainty without even knowing who she is. He gives her gifts because he knows immediately that God answers his prayer, and he has that certainty. And only afterwards, he asks her who she is. He doesn't just, he follows up on that idea, and he actually asks her who she is, and she says she's Besuel, and then he knows even more for certain that that's who he's talking about. So much so that he wanted the certainty and he achieved it, that when he repeats the story over to Besuel, to the father of Rivka, to tell over the story of how he met Rivka, he switches that part around. Rashi mentions that. He says, first I asked her who she was, and then I gave her the gifts. And Rashi says, why did he say that? That's not what happened if you read the story. First he gave her the gifts. Because he said he didn't want them to question his certainty. Like, why would you have given her a gift? You don't even know who she is. Because he had the certainty, and he wanted that certainty, and he got it before, and he wouldn't even share. He wasn't even willing to share. It was so personal. He wasn't ready to share it to Besuel because it didn't make sense. Because he grew up in the house of Avram, and he saw the hand of God immediately in that situation. So this week was the birthday of the Rabbi Rashab, the fifth Rabbi Chabad, Reb Shalom Dov Ber, and he has a very beautiful Torah on the idea about this prayer. So the verse says like this. This is the actual wording of chapter 24, 15. Vahi hu term kila ledaber, and he hasn't even finished speaking yet. Terem means he has not yet finished speaking. V'hine Rivka yotzes, and out comes Rivka. She's coming to join. She comes towards the water. Asher yuda lepesul b'amilka eshes nachar. That's what the Torah tells us, but he doesn't know that yet, right? Achi Avram, so it means the family of Avram. Echad Ashrichman, she's with the bucket on her head or on her shoulder. It says, and there's so many interesting things. It says over there, and then in 21. It says, "V'ha'ish mishta'ei lo macharish l'das hatzliach Hashem darkeim loy." He tests to see, will God give me the certainty that I'm asking for? And then he gives her the gifts, and these are gifts, not just any gifts. Rashi is not a medrash. Rashi is simple explanation. And Rashi immediately tells us that the gifts have significance. That he gave her Becca. Becca corresponds to the coins that the Jewish people gave to donate to the Mishkan. Ushnei Tzimidim represents the two bracelets, represents the luchos, the two luchos. The Asar Zahav Mishkalam, the weight, which was 10 mishkals of gold, represents the 10 commandments. So he doesn't just give her any gift, he gives her a gift that symbolizes the future of her children with Yitzchak. Again, he has this, and then only that he says, Bas Miyat, who are you? So the Rebbe Rashab talks about this idea in 15, that he doesn't even finish his prayer. Eliezer doesn't even finish. God doesn't even wait to hear him out. God says, I know what you want. He cut in. Let me cut you off. I know what you want, they'll give it. The Rebbe brings down the medrash that says that he's not the only one who had that kind of similar response from God. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he talks about when he's approached by Korach and his camp and those who came to challenge Moshe, right? They weren't challenging God; they were challenging Moshe. That who made you in charge, right? Who said that you are the one to decide who should be what, right? That this guy should be, that Aaron should be the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and that your cousin or whatever, our cousin, because he was family, should be the head of our family. He challenged everything. He challenged Moshe, and it says that Moshe said the same thing he said when he came to confront them and Dasanim and Aviram. That means their people, the followers. He said that if I'm not sent to do what I'm sent to do, then if I am sent to do what I'm supposed to do, then let the ground open its mouth and swallow everyone up. And it says immediately the ground opened up its mouth. King Solomon builds the temple. King Solomon builds the temple. His father Shmuel and David HaMelech prepares everything, but he doesn't build it. Shlomo builds it. And we find that again, that when it came time for the Shlomo was so excited that when they dedicated the temple, they didn't even fast that year on the fast of Yom Kippur, because it was within the 7 days of dedicating the temple, and they weren't even sure if that they were supposed to do that, but that's what they decided to do. The only time in history that as a collective group, the Jewish people did not fast on Yom Kippur by choice was in the time of dedication of the first temple, King Solomon. And he's waiting, he builds a temple and he's waiting for the presence of God to come down. And we find the same challenge that Aaron Cohen had when he wanted to dedicate this temple, right? So it says that when he dedicated the tabernacle, the Mishkan, it says that they were also waiting for the presence of God to come down. And it doesn't come down and Moshe has to make a prayer. But that the Medrash actually brings down the case of King Solomon. That King Solomon makes a prayer to God. And as he finishes his prayer, immediately the presence of God reveals itself in the temple. So the Medrash says that there were three great people that were answered immediately. Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, King Solomon, and Moses. There's one difference. That King Solomon and Moses, they had to finish the prayer. And Eliezer doesn't have to finish the prayer. The question is why? What's so special about Eliezer? And even more so, the basic question is, Eliezer, as great as he was no King Solomon and he wasn't Moses. And even if you want to say that he represented Abraham, but this was at a time that was before the giving of the Torah. The level of spiritual connection and revelation of godliness in the world after the giving of the Torah, before the giving of the Torah, was totally different. We know the Torah giving wasn't just that Hashem gave us the Torah. Torah giving was Hashem broke the separation between the spiritual and the physical. And Eliezer is before that point. He's talking still before Matan Torah, and he gets answered. He doesn't even have to finish his prayer. So the Rebbe Rashab challenges these questions. And he asks us some other questions. Why does it say that it says that the Medrash brings down that in that well was kind of an element of the well of Miriam? Why does it say that she went out? Why doesn't it say that she came? Where's she going out from? It says Yotzes means it should say Hine Rivka Ba. Why does it say Hine Rivka Yotzes? So going back to the original thing we spoke about, that Yitzchak was absolute spirituality. Avram again was going through the process. Yitzchak was his entire life was spirituality. At the time of his marriage, he was after the Akedah. He wasn't allowed to leave Israel, but no one ever said anything about going to the Garden of Eden. So he spent time there in the Garden of Eden. That's what it says that how did when Yaakov walks in to get a blessing from his father, and his father's blind, and he says, I smell the smell of Garden of Eden. The obvious question was, how does Yitzchak know the smell of Garden of Eden? He says, because he was there. He actually spent time there, so he knows the smell of the Garden of Eden. So he's very spiritual. And Rivka's not. We find tremendous things about Rivka They say she's like a rose. I mean, she was to grow up in the family that she grew up in, but she was in Chutz La'aretz. She was out of the country, where he wasn't able to go meet her. I mean, he wasn't able. She was living in a place where he wasn't able to go meet her. He had to send his servant, or his father had to send the servant to go get her. So she's one of the mothers, but she's no Yitzchak at that moment. She's representing the Amcha, the people, right? She's the real world. Yitzchak lived in some sort of spiritual kind of vacuum. So she's in the real world. She's living in the world of the physical. Knows who her father is. Knows well who her brother is. We know that from later, right? Knows right away, identifies Esav who he is, because she had a much more better tangible sense of what things were. She saw the weaknesses in people as well as the positive. Yitzchak had a more of saw people for the good in them, right? He saw the best in Esav. He couldn't identify the challenges of Esav, the problems of Esav. Rivka saw it. Rivka understood clearly who Esav was, and although it was her son, she said, "No, I want Yaakov. Yaakov is the one who gets the blessings, not Esav. I don't care how respectful he is to the father; he's not the one." And so Yitzchak goes and meets Rivka. That's a different kind of. That's a marriage. That's a marriage that the Chassidus teaches us. Kabbalistic teachings teach us. The Zohar teaches us that the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka is the like what we say in Hebrew, like almost like we say the seed, is the culmination of the beginning of the purpose of creation. I mean, when God created the world, He created the world with intention that there should be the Torah, and in the intention that there should be the Jewish people, right? It says, who did God consult with about creating the world? With the souls of the righteous, and it doesn't just mean the righteous; it means Amcha Kul and Tzaddikim, all the Jewish people. God, the point, the thought process, the motivation of why Hashem created the world is that there should be Jewish people living in the old times, right? Time was also a creation, right? That there should be a time, and in the time there should be, over all the period of times, over all the things that create time, the differences of time, not just time in minutes, but times and places and where we've been in our lives, and how we could be sitting here in Bellevue talking about Avram Avinu in a place so far away from that in every aspect, right? Not just Bellevue, I'm saying that in where we live from, where we were coming from thousands of years ago. And that was the idea that should be learning Torah here in this place right now. So that's the purpose of creation. And that purpose of creation started in the most revealed way in the Har Sinai in Matan Torah. But the power that God, to give the Torah, wasn't just that we had a nation. That the nation, one of the foundations of the nation was the union of Yitzchak and Sarah. Because Yitzchak and Rivka. Because Rivka represented the physical world, and Yitzchak represented the spiritual world. And when they came together, that was the first union. Because again, Avram and Sarah, together, they were together. It wasn't that Avram was holier than Sarah and he elevated Sarah. We find Sarah was a higher prophet than Avram, right? So Yitzchak, even when Yitzchak and Rivka pray for children, Yitzchak gets answered. Why? Because it says that Yitzchak is the son of Avram. I mean, he's on a high spiritual level, but the union of the two is the purpose of creation. And how do we continue to exist in the purpose of creation? That expresses itself in how Eliezer was answered. Because when Hashem, a lot of times we have blessings that we see in our life that take time. And sometimes, if you look back and you rushed something, or you were anxious about something, you look back, all you said was, all I needed was a little bit of time. If I would have been patient, then I would have done things differently. Or if I would have not been so desperate for immediate reaction, then I should maybe let things work out. Or if Mir Hashem, or God willing, things do work out, you look back and say, I had no reason really to go through the anxiety that I went through, because all I had to do was be patient and it would have worked out. Because some things take time. Time means that there's two separate things, and it's a process. Time, it says the Holy Maggid, the teacher of the Alter Rebbe, says that the first creation, the first thing that was created, in the whole existence of creation is time. Before time means... Torah says the first thing that the Torah tells us is, in the beginning, God created the world, right? And then He said, "Let there be light." Beginning means beginning. It means before anything there had to be time. Beginning of what? If there's no time, then what's the beginning? Let there be light means that yesterday there was no light and now there is light. So before even God uttered the word Bereshis, there had to be time. It means He first had to create time. The first creation had to be time. And once there's time, then there was a beginning. And once there was time, then there was no light and now there is light. See? So He had to first have... So time is the beginning of the creation of the physical world. The first thing is time. And therefore things take time. Right? When we want Hashem to answer our blessings, we say, we want it now. Part of the creation is there's time. Things take time. But Eliezer didn't take any time. It says he doesn't even complete his prayer. Same thing with Moses. Moses at least completes it. But it's an immediate reaction. Ad meheriyot tzvari. It happens immediately. While he's praying, all of a sudden it gets answered. It shows us that there was something so important going on over here, that they've reached a level above time, which time again is the beginning of creation, beginning of how things are supposed to be within creation. Eliezer's mission was so important. Again, we find that he skipped over 800 kilometers in a day. He had to get there importantly. He had to get there immediately. And as soon as he gets there, and he makes a prayer, God says, this is such an important mission because this represents the union of physical and spiritual, that it has to be above time. It has to reach a level of above creation. Because the only way you could take something spiritual and make it physical, the only way you could take the cloth the parchment and turn it into Sefer Torah, the only way you could take something physical and make it film, the only way you could actually bring spiritual light when you light Shabbos candles, is you have to go above time. You have to go before creation. You have to go why there was a creation of time. There was a creation of time because there should be Torah mitzvahs. And that's where Eliezer is even greater than Moses and Shlomo. Shlomo HaMelech was talking about bringing God in the world. He wanted to bring a manifest of the revelation of godliness in the temple. But that was a level that also had a little bit to do with time. Why? How do we know? Because the temple's not here now. The temple was here. The temple was not there. Then it was there. Now it's not there again. It's spiritually, there's the holiness of the temple is still there, but we don't have the temple the way it was. Moshe Rabbeinu also represented the idea that there's a prophet, that there is someone who prophesies, who talks in the name of God. Even a prophet, there's when God's talking to him, when he's not talking to him, before and after. There's this time. Once Torah came into the world, there's never a time the world's not being impacted by Torah. Nothing anyone can do. There's no nation in the world. There's no people in the world. There's no incidents in the world that can make that there shouldn't be Torah in the world. Once Torah came to the world, it penetrated it forever. Torah constantly stayed above time. It never had a, as time changes, Torah evolves. There's never a time we say, Torah doesn't apply anymore. Anyway, Torah applies today as much as it applied 3,500 years ago. We don't have the korbanos, we don't have the sacrifices, but we have the prayers to represent the sacrifices. We're constantly accomplishing what we can accomplish with Torah ever since Torah is given. Because once Torah is given, it is above time. There's no time this Torah is not going to be here. Once that impact started, the impact would, and that's why it had to happen immediately. God wanted to show something over here. That this is something so important, it's going to penetrate all times forever. And finishing off with the famous idea, and it could be you guys heard this already, but it's so important to mention, is that this is really the week of Shabbos candles. And it's an amazing idea that you think about it. How do we learn about Shabbos candles this week? So, Eliezer comes and takes Rivka back to meet Yitzchak, and Yitzchak, says, okay, very good. I hear it says that he said everything. You think Yitzchak would say, he would rubber stamp it. He says, I hear what you're saying. It's a nice story. Great miracles. It's all good. I want to see it for myself. I need to see it for myself. It says before he marries her, he checks her out. In what way? He brings her to his mother's tent, And immediately he sees that all the spiritual blessings and miracles around his mother happen as soon as she comes in. What are the three miracles that and this is Rashi. Rashi brings this down. It's not a medrash. Rashi brings down. What are the three miracles immediately he sees? He sees that there's a cloud on the tent. He sees there's a blessing in the bread. And he sees that the candle is lit for the entire week. I mean, she lit it on Friday night and it went like the Hanukkah menorah, went all the way to the next Shabbos. Her candle is lit. That means it didn't have oil for 7 days. It lit for 7 days. And he saw that miracle. He said, "This is my mother. She's on the level of my mother." And Rashi goes into, the Rebbe has a beautiful explanation to know, how does Rashi know that this is what he saw in her? It doesn't say that. The Torah doesn't say that he took her to his mother's tent and there was a cloud and then there was a blessing in the bread and that she lit Shabbos candles. No one says that. It says, the actual verse says that he brought her to his mother's tent. Huh?
And they got married.
It says, yeah, so it says like this. It says,
Almost immediately.
It says in 24:67, the last pasuk. So he says, what happens? So 66, he says, he tells everything that happened. Yitzchak says, fine, I hear what you're saying, very nice, it sounds good. But then the next verse says, what does he do? You think it's eight, and they got married. That's how it should end. It doesn't end like that. It says, he brings her to the tent, and then he takes her to get married. What's this taking her? What did he take her to the tent for? So and he doesn't just say he took her to Leha'oyel, or he took her to the famous tent. So the Rashi learns from the three words Oyel, Sarah, Imoy, the three mitzvahs. What's Oyel? Ha'oyela. So from that he learns that it meant a cloud, because we find Hamakoim when he talks about the sacrifice of Yitzchak. It says that Avram came to Hamakom, the place. Rashi says over there, how do you know what place to go to? So Rashi says he saw there was a cloud on the mountain, he knew he had to go to the mountain. So we know when there's a hay, the famous tent, like the famous mountain, there was a cloud on the tent. Imoy, Sarah Sarah was that she was Sarah, a woman, right? And that means it showed that the blessing of the woman is in the bread, I think. And Imoy was the blessing in the candles. The question I find fascinating is that not just that we find that Yitzchak sees these tremendous things in Rivka and says, this is the woman I need to marry and this is for sure her. But we only know about Sarah through this story. I mean, nowhere does the Torah tell us. By the way, you should know how holy was Sarah, how special was Sarah, that she had a cloud over her tent, and she had a blessing in the bread, and she had candles lit 7 days a week. No, only after Rivka comes, and Rivka has these things happen to her, we say that she had the same things that Sarah had. So then we know that Sarah also had them. So why would the Torah tell us, if the Torah wants to tell us such a great thing, why would the Torah not tell us that about Sarah? Why did the Torah wait to tell us that about Rivka? Again, the Torah doesn't tell us stories, the Torah tells us lessons, so teaches us lessons. So why would the Torah wait so long to tell us something so important like that? So I think, this is my own interpretation, is that for that very fact, because Torah is not a story, Torah wants to tell us the continuity of it, the continuation of it. The fact that Sarah had the miracles is one thing. The fact that the miracles continued, the fact that Rivka had the miracles, the fact that, so the Rebbe actually takes from this, the Rebbe actually builds from this two cases. One case is that she lit candles before she was married. This is the basis of the Rebbe's campaign, that girls, and how old was Rivka? We know that she was 3 years old, and she lit candles before she got married, because it said he only married her after she lit the candles. It means that she lit the candles before she got married. So the Rebbe actually learns from here that the spiritual blessing that Sarah, then we saw it in Rivka, once we see that it's continued, it wasn't something isolated by Sarah, then it matters to us, because that means that every Jewish girl, every Jewish woman has that power in her. Every Jewish woman lights candles. It may not be physical for 7 days, but it actually brings light in the house the entire week. Every woman has the ability to make her tent a holy tent, which is a representation of the cloud. Every woman is a blessing in the bread. So we may not see it, like we saw it so clear by Rivka, but it's there. And that's why the Torah only tells us it in the next generation, to teach us that it's not something that only happened by Sarah. The specialty of it is that it continues, and it continues from Sarah to Rivka. It means it continues to old times. And the Rebbe actually tells us an amazing thing that we find halachically, that if the woman's not in the house to light candles, the man lights candles. So we know that Avram kept the entire Torah. So we're sure that from the time that Sarah passes away until Rivka shows up in the house, Avram was lighting candles. For the very fact that Avram was lighting candles, and that the candles only, it says that only when Rivka came did the candles light 7 days. It means that as great as Avram was, that kind of thing has nothing to do with Avram. That has nothing to do with the man. Avram lit candles, but the kind of blessing that the candles, the bread and the spirituality and the holiness and the purity of the tent represents, that's something that the woman brings to the house. That's not something, even the man who has an obligation to do it if she's not there. But that's special blessing, and that's the importance of this week. We learned about the importance of the idea of the candles, of the lighting the Shabbos candles. So it's very important that a woman should light Shabbos candles, even if they're not married, they should light Shabbos candles. And just to finish off, the Haftarah of this week is the Haftarah. It's a very famous Haftarah of the succession of King David. We know that any successor or succession worth mentioning was challenged, right? So who's going to take over? Moshe doesn't know who's going to take him over, and we tell him it's Yeshua. King David has so many sons, and everyone wants to be King David, right? His advisor wants to be King David, Achitophel wants to be King David, and his sons want to be King David, and everyone wants to be King David. Everyone wants a part of King David. Everyone wants to take over King David, and so Shlomo takes over King David. And the amazing thing is that all we're talking about, again, the entire Haftarah talks about the preparation and the death of King David. And the end of the Haftarah, like the beginning of this week's Parsha, is that after they have the whole entire conversation, Bathsheba, one of the wives of David, with Nathan the priest, the prophet, come. Everyone else is against them. King David is already at a certain age where he's almost oblivious of what's going on. And the other son has an entire feast, invites everyone to the feast, even David's most faithful servants, like his general Yoav, his cousin, his general, who was with him from the beginning, right? Except Solomon and his wife and the prophet and Aviasar, the Kohen, but otherwise everyone else is there. So what happens? And this is this is a pivotal moment. It's not a sure thing. King Nasan Hanavi is extremely concerned that although David promised Solomon the throne, he promised it to Bathsheba. But they were scared that there's going to be a succession that's going to work otherwise. And he feels threatened. As a prophet, he doesn't have the confidence that's going to go well. He cooks up this entire scheme that Bathsheba has to go in and plead the case, and he will come in afterwards and question as if maybe that's what David wants, and then they're going to get David to commit to making Solomon, recommit to Solomon being king. And after they go through this entire, you would imagine, he's sitting there, and the Torah tells us he's very old. He wasn't that old in today's age, but he was old. He was an old warrior. He was cold. He wasn't feeling well. He was deep in study. Every moment at that time, he was in Torah study. And then what did he come to bother him about? Who's going to take me over? And then when they get him to commit, the king to commit to Solomon, how does the Haftarah finish off? Let the king David live forever. We're just discussing that he's not going to live forever, and we're discussing who's going to take him over. But again, it's because the life of David is knowing how is King David going to live forever. Bathsheba and Nasan said, now that Shlomo HaMelech is going to take you over as king, then King David will live forever. Because our life is a continuation, our life is not just the time that we're in this world, but to influence and the people who carry on the message, and the good message, hopefully, that we give over to our family and to generations after us. Good Shabbos.
Thank you.